we had been working on this idea. Me and my DP, Tommy Maddox, we've been working on this idea. I was like, yo, I got an idea to do the sequence. And it grew to this motion control thing. And so Tommy, my AD, Dennis, we were all in on this, but it was taking a little time. And the producer was like, yo, this is taking way too long, 6/8 of a page. And I'm like, maybe let me start modifying it. And my DP was like, man, don't you change a fucking thing. This shit is dope. You start modifying it, it's gonna ruin the whole thing. And I'm like, all right, let's just live in it then. He was 100% right, 100% right. And that sequence is one of my proudest moments in terms of storytelling because it condenses a woman's addiction into like a minute and a half, minute and 45 seconds to show. And it's not just her smoking, but you see her wardrobe change, her face changes, her bedroom changes until she starts hawking stuff. So we just tell this story so cinematically. I hold that with me because sometimes, once again, it goes back to when you're doing something that scares you, don't let the fear disrupt you. Just push through that joint.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is a podcast on directing for anybody that's quite simply ever watched anything. Pete converses with a wide range of fellow directors, writers, actors, showrunners, producers, executives, and more on a journey to determine just what makes a good director and why we'll always need stories. The Director is Pete Chatmon's digital studio, built on the pillars of craftsmanship that ensure a unique vision. I'm talking about story, innovation, perspective. Learn more about The Director, and better yet, get your official Director's Chair wear by visiting www.drctr.video. That's drctr.video.
All right, what's up, people? This is Pete Chatmon welcoming you to Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon, episode 26. And what do we have this week? We're welcoming director Carl Seaton, one of my, favorite types of combos to do, that director-to-director rap. But before we dive in, I will give you the updates on what's going on in this director's world, just to give y'all a little bit of an interview into what transpires day to day, week to week. This week, I turned in 2 director's cuts for my episodes of You. As I mentioned before, I did episode 307 and 308 of season 3, episodes 7 and 8 of a 10-episode season. Very, very challenging episodes, very, very revelatory for the plot. So can't tell you nothing about it, but had some really cool stunt sequences where I got to work with storyboard artist Bridget Shaw, who worked on my book and I first worked with on Silicon Valley, and that was incredibly fun. When the episodes drop, I will probably bring her back on and we'll talk about that specifically. But for the logistics and the mathematics of that, on a director's cut for a 1-hour show, you get 4 days to deliver your cut. So essentially I had 8 days to deliver these 2 different episodes. As an aside, for a half-hour show, you get 2 days. When you receive your editor's cut, which is the first thing that you get, you will be given something that's not trimmed. The air is not necessarily cut out of it. If there's anything unique to the episode that you've done, you're probably going to have a few tweaks to it because you have a very unique vision for it. But all the other things that fall in line with what the show does more or less week to week are probably going to be very well represented, and you'll be just maybe turning a couple knobs to fine tune that. This was something that I was doing in the midst of prep for the season finale of All Rise. So a lot of the prep on that show, which is mostly Zoom these days, with the exception of location scouting, which is self-reports and driving yourself there. There were a lot of early mornings and late nights where I'd go back and send notes or watch cuts and try and refine those 2 episodes so they best represented my vision for what I saw off of the page. They will be passed on to the producers, who will then get their first pass at first chance to review what you envisioned the episode to be, and then edits will happen from there. So we will see how that turns out. But I think the thing that I've learned over time is that the director's cut is really, it's a handshake of 2 things. You're trying to find out what the showrunner wants, And sometimes they want to see every scene. Other shows, they don't have a problem maybe with you lifting lines or jokes or scenes altogether. So that's one of the first things you're trying to confirm. And then it's really, really, really defending your vision for the things that are unique to the show. And so I spend a lot of time working on transitions and stunts and things that were not going to be in any other episode because they were unique to mine. And I feel very good about what we handed in. So those two were handed in on day 2 of shooting for me. So it was a little bit of a relief to check that off the box while continuing to shoot and prep All Rise, which is going well. I am awaiting an update on a pilot that I pitched for as a director. So hopefully that will work out. I know there's a few directors in the mix, but hopefully my pitch was the one that resonated the most, because I was really a really big fan of this 1-hour drama. And we are going through the process of finalizing the table of contents for my book, Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook. So that's what's going on in my world. After this, after we wrap on Friday for All Rise, which will be 2 days after this episode airs, I'll be diving into a heist script that I co-wrote with Candace Sanchez-McFarlane, my co-writer on Wednesday morning, and taking an episodic dramedy that we've been pitching and trying to pivot it into the narrative podcast world to see if we can't establish it as a narrative podcast, develop intellectual property around the idea, and then pitch it as a TV show. And these are some new developments, now that I have switched to CAA for representation. So that's another new update. And that'll be a conversation maybe on another episode about those realities in your team. But right now, we're gonna dive into episode 26 with my man, Carl Seaton. He's a director, writer, producer, the originator of Get Fly Fridays, which we'll talk about. But I've known him going back 20 years now when he had done a feature film called 1 Week. And for those of us, Black directors who were on the grind, there were not many of us, and we all were at least aware of each other, if not like friendly. But I definitely remember us sharing emails even going back into the early 2000s. But he's directed Supergirl, The Chi, Chicago PD and Fire, FBI, Batwoman, and Snowfall. And he's one of those guys who leaves a mark on every show, has a very clear vision, a very unique style, and a very clear way of communicating. So we're gonna dive into episode 26 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon, starring Mr. Carl Seaton.
Roll sound. Speed.
The interview. Take 1.
Yo, man, I wanted to dive in, man. Where you were telling me before we started, but where did you first live when you moved to LA?
The Jungles, right off of La Brea, and well, it was Rodeo then. Now it's Obama, but I was right over there by Dorsey, the track, and I lived over there. We moved over there like late '99, so it was still pretty thick over there, and definitely a blood community. And what's funny, I lived over there when they were shooting Training Day. And I remember when the Blood stole the car in Training Day and was like, the director and Dizzy got to come talk to us. I remember because everybody's talking about it in the neighborhood. We were like, oh, wow, it's crazy. So it was a lot of adventures going on in the jungle. Every day was a different adventure. You never knew what was going to happen. You see shootouts, you see dead bodies and, cats getting robbed and things like that, helicopters every night. So it was car chases would end in the jungle because the jungle has so many trees. Right. Helicopters couldn't really follow folks. So cats was always using the jungle as a destination when being chased by cops. Another thing we learned. We picked up on a lot learning that, when we moved out there.
Yeah, it's so crazy, man. It's like, that's almost like an international thing to some degree. Because I remember I did a project in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. And when we went to, what was the name for, I forget the name that they had for where all the African folks live, right? But it was always on the other side of the tracks. And when you got in there, they didn't have any, none of the homes had numbers. You know what I mean? None of the streets had signs because they wanted it if there ever was anything with the cops, there's like, we're not going to help you find anything because you're already trying to put stuff on us. And the ill part was they had, the country had built these like stadium lights that would shine into the townships. That's what it was, into the townships. So that was their version of the ghetto bird helicopter, like to always be ever present. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how the oppression works, huh?
Yeah, man. It's very crafty in how they do it. It's very crafty and very methodical in its systemic breaking down of things. So, and it does it. Sometimes they do it. Sometimes it's overt and blatant, and sometimes it just creeps up on you from behind. You don't even realize what it is. So, yeah.
Right. And so you're originally from Chicago. You fall into, first just thanks for being on the show, man. You fall into like one of the brothers that I don't know when we met, but I just kind of always knew about you. I knew about you from 1 week, your debut feature. But tell me about getting your start in Chicago and kind of and making that first film, because I know it's never a direct route.
No, it's never a direct route. And even after the film became even more indirect of a road. Growing up in Chicago, man, loving movies, loving TV shows, but never really thought you could do this for a living until I saw Do the Right Thing. And, Spike Lee's movie I came out of that theater just transformed. Like, man, I don't know what a director or producer does, but this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to tell stories like this and move people the way I was moved coming out of that theater. So that kind of started the quest. Didn't have any family members in the industry, anything like that. Hollywood and LA and the industry were millions of miles away. So I just really, I was like, I don't know how to even go about this, but I'm gonna, do my best. And started, just educating myself, going to film school parallel with also educating myself, reading books and things like that. Like Spike would, make a book after each film.
Yeah.
So I would read all these books. Those became like my Bibles, man. He was like, you write to create jobs for yourself. So I said, okay, let me learn how to write. So started, studying screenwriting and things like that. So while in film school was cool. And,
where'd you go to film school?
Columbia College.
Okay. In Chicago, right?
In Chicago, yeah, in Chicago. Yeah. So, and that was great because, they gave you cameras. It was more hands-on because I was at a school prior to that was more theoretical. And I was like, yeah, this theory-based thing isn't going to work for me. I got to be out here. I got to do it. I got to be out, actually making films and learning how to craft a story, cinematically, making them, typical student film mistakes and such. But Columbia was great for that. And while I was there, I, kept writing and started doing short films. And after graduation, prior to graduation, I invited my family. I got a big family on both sides. So I invited everybody, knowing they weren't going to make it, but they would send me money. And I used that money with my buddy. We put our money together and did a short. And this, we shot on 16 millimeter, edited on an Avid. So it took us like 2 years to get that short done, man. It was a couple G's, a lot of mistakes we made, because that was outside of school. So we had to hire the crew, rent the equipment. Wow. So it was a whole different, learning curve doing it on your own when you don't have that safety net of the film school. So that really let me know it was like a sink or swim thing. Like, okay, is this something I really want to do? Or is this something I thought I wanted to do? And that confirmed for me that this is something I really want to do. Yeah.
That's interesting too, man, because I remember like teaching at NYU, like they kind of kept the camera away from you for like the first year and a half, and had you focus on audio and have you focus on like the single frame, like can you compose a shot and tell a story image by image. But junior year was when people made their first short film where it wasn't like anything you could do in 4 hours in the afternoon. Like you had to go get a location and take the gear over the weekend. And the attrition rate of like folks who went from wanting to be a director to be an editor or be a producer or be a writer, it was crazy because they were like, yo, it's so much more than, picking shots and having a vision. You got to navigate wild shit that like you never could imagine would come your way.
Yeah, the curveballs come in ways you can't imagine. That Murphy's Law applies so much, man. I mean, anything that you could think of goes wrong, that can go wrong will go wrong. And things you couldn't even imagine could go wrong. So yeah.
What was one of the like biggest, like I had a fire on my thesis film, night one, after having been told that the person who would fund the entire thing was not going to, on the day of checkout, We drive to Jersey, and I have a fire in the back of a diner. What's kind of your craziest curveball, Murphy's Law iteration when you were coming up?
Oh man, let me see. One in particular that stands out. I had a Rottweiler that I put in the film, and they always say don't put kids or animals in your film. I had both in my first short, and my Rottweiler didn't like my DP.
Oh,
and my Rottweiler is a pretty chill Rottweiler for the most part, but not that day. He bit the hell out of my DP, man. He took a chunk out of his hand. I said, I'm about to get sued. I'm about to put my dog down. DP was cool about it because we were talking, and the DP stepped towards me in the conversation. My dog perceived that as aggression, and he wasn't having that. And this is like day one of production. Man. On top of the fact that, and then we had an ambulance for a certain sequence that didn't want to work. The lights didn't want to work. I mean, you can't, man, you name it. Our insurance dropped out like Friday at 5 p.m. So we had to find insurance to get the equipment for Saturday morning. So it was, man, what I've learned is it's all problem solving. All you do is really solve problems throughout the day. And depending on the low budget, no budget, high budget, you're still solving these problems all day.
That's the job. That just made me think of like when I did a Grey's Anatomy episode, and I had I think it was a crossover. So the other show had picked an ambulance for reasons that worked for them. But then I had that patient travel into my episode, and the ambulance that they picked and the stretcher that they picked wasn't really fully operable. So the things that I wanted to do in my shots to get that ambulance out gracefully were impossible.
Yeah.
And you don't who the fuck knew? You know what I mean? So you make the short. How was it received?
People, it was received that way. People like, interesting. I mean, it was some sci-fi out there type, we were ambitious about it, man. It was like this thing about a guy gets hit by a car, and instead of dying, he gets his touch of death and goes around touching people and animals and plants, but ends up, this kid gets hit by a car, he touches him, brings him back to life, and he passes. So we went for an ambitious story. So what it was, like I said, it was received like, interesting. Okay, you guys are thinkers, you're not lowbrow with it, but we were savvy enough to realize like, okay, we just want to see if we can get one done. We got to get back in the lab, you know what I'm saying? So I was fortunate enough to be, partnered with a cat, my brother Kenny Young. We would constantly write, and we were harder on ourselves than anybody. We were harsh critics, man. We didn't sit back and just say, we the shit, because we the shit. We were like, nah, we gotta earn this, because we knew how competitive the landscape is, and we wanted to be as competitive as possible. So we constantly were studying, constantly looking at what we did, putting it down, coming back saying, oh, that was trash. Let's throw that out and start all over. So, but that short film, getting it done, just proved to us that with the right effort, right attitude, and right resiliency, you can create something out of nothing. So that kind of gave us that initial catalyst to just kind of keep going, which led us to, writing and doing 1 week.
Right. Yeah, man, it's a lot. It's so much like sports to me, right? It's like you practice something and you might not, your 3-point shot is not accurate, but you could tell you can get it there. And so you're going to keep trying until you do. So 1 week, that was your debut feature. That came out in 2000?
Yeah, it came out theatrically in 2001. We had a whole festival run in 2000 where we had a lot of different festivals around the world with it. So that was the one that introduced me to, the industry. And we moved out to LA right before it came out. So yeah, it was that was the one that started it all basically for me.
Right. And so how was that, if you can, can you speak to budget and how you put that money together? And before that, what it was about and the inspiration behind it?
Okay. So it was, we knew we wanted to do an independent film, and we knew we couldn't just do any kind of film. We wanted to do something that was unique, that was different. And so we spitballed a whole bunch of different topics. So we came up with a specific topic, was a subject matter, and then built this topic around it. It's basically about a guy who finds out the week before his wedding that he may have contracted HIV. And he had to wait. And this is back in the day when you took an HIV test, you had to wait a week for the results. That's how long ago this was. Now you can do it in 2 minutes, but back then you had to wait a week, sometimes 2 weeks. So what we did was we chronicled this movie And, we followed his life through this 1 week as he waited for his HIV result.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the choices that it directly affected, which so happened to be the same time he was getting ready to get married. So initially we wrote it, as all out comedy, but once again, we wrote it, we sat down on it, we said, we're doing this a disservice. And then we started doing some extensive research about partner notification and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of helped us bring the dramatic side to it. So it wasn't just all drama and it wasn't all comedy, it was a balance of both. And initially we were pledged by an investor $1 million to do it. But that, for every 5 people you ask, 4 will ignore you, 1 will say yes. And other people to say yes, 4 out of them 5 gonna flake on you. So we went from being pledged $1 million, $500,000, $250,000. We're like, okay, how much do we actually have? We had like $50,000 amongst ourselves.
Right.
We were like, yo, let's shoot it. And it was a huge debate in our film community in Chicago. They were like, yo, just shoot a trailer, use that to recruit investors. And we were like tired of the investor shuffle. We were like, fuck it, man, let's just shoot it for $50,000. Everybody told us we were crazy.
Right.
Instructors, the filmmakers, people we looked up to, they were like, that's insane. You're not gonna shoot a film for 35 millimeter for $50,000. But that's exactly what we did. You know what I'm saying? Right. We just started piecemealing it. We were like, okay, let's get the film. We got the film out of New York. We got short ends out of New York, had them in the fridge.
Right.
We got a deal at Panavision. We got the grip truck for a stick. We just started putting it all together. Like, okay, let's just get it in the can. Then we'll figure out post. And then, so we broke it down into doable steps like that. But it was quite an adventure doing it for no money, you know what I'm saying? And, but it's literally willing it into existence.
Right. How much, and just for folks who might not know, because y'all never shot film, short ends are, I guess, magazines would be in 400 feet. And if anybody had a scene or just there weren't enough, let's say they were down to the last 80 feet and they knew the scene would roll out on that mag, they just pull it, reload the mag, and that's how you would have short ends. You'd have a bunch of 80 foot, 50 foot, 20 foot, or maybe it could even be 200 feet if the scene wouldn't be captured on that. And then you could buy that unused film and put together your project on a cheaper budget.
Yeah.
This makes me want to, I'm kind of going to hop ahead, but we'll come back to the chronology of what you're doing. How do you find it challenging to remove that like indie hustle sensibility and like go-to toolkit that you have when working in TV? And
no, you're actually, man, I hear what you say. It's actually become one of my superpowers. I used to be really embarrassed of all the budgets I work with. Like, I mean, of all my features, the biggest budget I've had was like maybe $600,000 for the features. But I've done shorts for like $3,000, $200, and because of these type of budgets, I prepare in a way like I don't have a safety net. I'll never be in this location again. I'll never have this opportunity again. So I have to make sure I can cover myself evenly. So my preparation game was built off of that. And I apply it, even in these TV shows, you know what I'm saying? And even in applying it to these TV shows allows me to go above and beyond getting extra coverage, making the day, you know what I'm saying? And not just making the day, but being able to put some nuance and style on it as well. And that's all because of the preparation. Because my prep game really got extensive. Like, okay, we can only afford, like you said, when you got short ends, it's 400 feet or less, like there's a rollout. Like there's no, like with digital, you just reset, go again. But with film, like there's no go again. And you talk to the actors like, hey, listen, I know you're having a hard time with it, but you got to get this. We got 75 feet. So we got to get this going. And, the rehearsal game and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, that preparation game from that no budget filmmaking has been a huge advantage to me that I can apply to these shows that are $4 million and $5 million and such.
I remember I was doing, this is what got me into the DGA. And it was like, I had 12 to 15 pages and I had a 10-hour day. It was Due North for Insecure, the show within the show. Yeah. And we were doing the end, like dinner scene with like a fight and all this wildness. And I was like, I'm looking at the clock, like it ain't gonna happen. Like this shit literally is not, it's just not possible in the available time. And I was like, I got to reveal who I am. And so I was like, look, are y'all comfortable we'll rehearse. And then when we get down to 30 minutes left, we'll shoot it. And I'm just going to call freeze and then put the camera where the next setup would be in my edit. Mm-hmm. And they were like, okay. And it's like Regina Hall, Michael J. White, like Scott Foley. And I'm like, this shit gonna look mad. I'm gonna look like the most lowliest budget dude ever. But people are like, word, okay, let's get it. Yeah. And it's funny how even that can be invigorating, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because they get into a routine of coverage. When you come in and mix it up, they're like, oh, I gotta be on my game now so we can execute X, Y, and Z. Like you come in with a real cool oneer. It's almost like theater. Like you got to tap into your theater aspect, get in your theater bag because that camera's moving. And I'm not yelling, we're just going to keep moving with it. So, but yeah, man, but you got to having that background. Like I said, I was ashamed of it for a little bit because you be around other filmmakers who've only done films of $10 million up. And they're like, how do you even do a movie for $1 million? I'm like, man, I don't know. I've never done a movie for $1 million. I'm sitting here like with a level of embarrassment, but I realized over the years, like, oh no, this is a superpower, actually. So, because you tap in, and when you got to tap into it because your gut is like, yo, you don't have enough time. You don't have all the coverage you need. You can't cut this to tell the story you need to tell. Right. What you going to do? And then the spider says, like, you got to make a choice. And then you kick in and everybody's like, oh, and then they come at you. We've never done that before. That was actually kind of cool. And everybody gets excited and galvanized and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, cool. I think it's the winning formula, man, to a long career. Yeah. So you make the film, you travel the festival circuit. What did that look like after all the hard work? You made it for 50K. What was the life of the film after that?
It was very interesting life. So we'd go to these festivals. We won ABFF, we won Urban World, Pan African. It went to FESPACO. It was in Toronto. So we had all this festival love, but distributors were like not fucking with us. Right. They would tell us to our face like, yeah, this movie's too smart for Black people. I'm like, wow. So, it was bittersweet in that regard. Like we go on these festivals getting all this adoration and love, but we're still living in the jungle. You know what I'm saying? We still trying to figure out like, rent due on the first. So we got to figure out how to do this and do that and so forth. So, but in doing that, I realized there was a disconnect. Like the emotional impact of the story is what hit people. But I was savvy enough to realize the craftsmanship of the film wasn't up to par to be competitive. So I said, I have some more learning I got to do. I got to get back in the lab as a director, not necessarily as a writer, but as a director and step my craft up. I can't just sit back and get complacent. Like I got all these trophies and these awards, but I'm like, nah, something is lacking here. So let me get back in the lab.
Now, do you feel it was lacking in terms of production value or in terms of like what you did with your available resources?
Both. Okay. I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. You look back like, what the fuck was I thinking when I did that? Man, I could have done this and this. And I mean, you look back in hindsight through the lens of today with much more experience. Right. And I'm like, man, and just in terms of coverage and just, composition, pacing, little things like that, I wasn't really thinking about. Like, well, for example, there's a lot of profanity, and our film was almost rated NC-17 just because of profanity. And when we were making it, I didn't see a problem with the profanity. It didn't stand out to me, but I'm like, had we just modified the profanity, this movie would have been PG-13, which could have allowed us we could have gotten contracts with public school systems and all that. So we literally walked away from millions just because of language. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lesson you learn, you know what I'm saying? So that's the biggest thing, learning lessons and being mindful enough to say, okay, what's the lesson here? So like I said, it was ironic. It was bittersweet. We're getting this adoration, love, and people are still fans of the film. People still hit me up about it. Yeah. And because it still comes on like World AIDS Day, usually on BET or Black Stars picked it up. So it still has a life. Unfortunately, 20 years later, it's still a relevant topic in the African American community because HIV is still there. So that's one of the cons of it. But you're just looking back at that, just like the lessons, like okay, I could have done this, I could have done this. It's always a woulda, coulda, shoulda. So
right. So what did you say? All right, Carl, next project, here's what you got to do. Like what were, I don't know, like 2 or 3 of the things that you were intent about applying to your next directorial outing?
I said I had to move the camera, and I had to move 2 things: move the camera and move my talent. So blocking and coverage, I had to step my game up on that. And what's funny is I didn't really understand that until after the fact. I was like, okay, what am I missing here? And I started just looking at other films. And that's when I started watching films with the sound off. You know what I'm saying? And that made me see it like, oh, okay. Because, with the sound design, that helps mask a lot of things, or it just it seduces you into the story. But if you mute it, you just see it just strictly from a composition perspective. You're like, oh, okay. So these Spielberg wonders and various takes, like, oh, okay, now I see how that was achieved, how that went from this wide to a 50-50 to an over the shot to a close-up and over the shoulder and so forth. So you just start looking at it from a different way. And then also being in LA, being around filmmakers that do this for a living, I had the opportunity, I was talking to cats like Bill Duke and Reggie Hudlin, and they would just be dropping game on me, and John Singleton as well. And I'm just taking it all in like a sponge. I'm still a sponge, man. And I've been fortunate enough to be around great filmmakers that cats been doing it for 30, 40 years. Like, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm like, okay, that's the path I want to be on, an eternal student. So,
it's an interesting thing too. Like, I don't think I know, and I could totally just be ignorant or not be aware of enough, but I know in my film school education, I never had a class on blocking. You know what I mean? I don't believe there's one at the film school I went to. I don't know of anyone that's told me about a class on blocking that they took. And that is your number one responsibility. You can't, like, before you pick the shot, you got to decide that these motherfuckers is moving, right? And so, like, it's amazing that hasn't been almost like understand subtext and now think about how that applies to whether or not these people move or not and how, and then think about how you're going to shoot it.
Yeah. Man, I have some qualms with film schools in general, because, when I got out to LA and was getting kicked in the teeth on a regular, I went back to my film school instructors like, yo, you didn't tell me shit about any of this. What's up? And they were like, I've never been to LA. I wouldn't know. So I'm like, okay, your track was education, but I'm in the practical industry and they aren't necessarily on the same path. I'm like, wow, what I'm learning out here, like you said, no one ever discussed blocking or in that regard. And not just blocking, but how to elicit performances in a concise, short amount of time. And there's so many nuances in storytelling that are never discussed or even scratched the surface of in film school, pushed out like, good luck.
Transitions. Right?
Transitions.
Again, I bring these two things up specifically just because I feel like in TV, they're like both the director's offense and defense, right? Like you can, like, you block efficiently and creatively and smart and smartly, I don't know if that's a word, but intelligently, and then people buy in, then the show gets shot, the scene gets shot the way you envisioned it, even if you can't change the way they are gonna, like, break down that scene in terms of coverage. And then when you get into the transitions, more often than not, they ain't even looking at that when you do it, right? So you be like, oh yeah, and so, like, and then you slide off of that at the end, right? And then you come in on the next scene 4 days later, yo, slide into that, and they're like, cool, right? And then you cut it together, and people are like, yo, Carl killed that, and they're never checking for that.
They're not.
They say the lines. So let me ask you this: what have you found to be? Have you developed a superpower or a toolkit for dealing with difficult, challenging talent?
Still learning that. That's still a learning curve right there.
Yeah.
But I have a couple ways I've learned to maneuver around some of them, because some of them you just got to accept for who they are. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was working with an actor once, older gentleman who's been in the game forever, just cantankerous. Like, I gave him a note, he challenged the note, he refuted the note, but then he did exactly what I asked. It was hilarious. And I was like, this is just his process. So the biggest thing I learned was, man, don't take this personal. Don't take it personal. Whatever this thing may be with them, it may have nothing to do with you. So the first thing was to not take it personal. Another thing I've learned to do with some actors that are like that is direct the fuck out of everybody around them and leave them on the island. And let them see me directing everybody around them. And then when they see that they're on this island, I come and give them one little simple, doable note, and they pounce on it. And that's how you break it down. But what I really like to do with difficult actors, and usually, people give you a heads up who's difficult. They all know who they are.
Right.
I try to have conversations with them as early as possible to let them know that I'm not just here as a a traffic cop. I'm here to really tell the best story and elicit the best performance and try to figure out how they like to work. What works best for them, how best can I elicit the best performance from them, and so forth. And that helps break down a lot. But even still, you get on set, it's still,
Yeah. What do you do when you do that? And then you still find it ain't working. Like, have you ever had to like, arch your back up a little bit, hit them with the bass, you know what I mean? Like have any of those instances happened? Or
they haven't, man, but I'm also 6'4", so yeah, that hasn't happened. But there have been times where, we have to have discussions, and a couple different things, man. We'd have to have discussions, and I let them know, like, I'm not just gonna let this ride and just say whatever you say, because, I know what's at stake here. And I know I'm fighting for the story, you know what I'm saying? Right. And I let them know, like, this is for the story. This isn't about me. I don't personalize it. So, digging in like that. And then also I've had situations where an actor can lose themselves and not remember where they were, and just kind of stand with them. Like, I'm with you on this. Let's break this down into doable steps. And I think the biggest thing is just breaking it down piece by piece, as opposed to looking at it from the macro. I hit it from the micro. So beat by beat. So we're checking these beats off in this scene so that we can get this performance. Because in my head, I got a checklist. Like, I got to get this beat. I got to get this beat. I got to get this beat. Once I get these 3-4 beats from them in this scene, I'm good. So I just check them off. So, and like I said, let's say I got 4 beats. Sometimes I may only get 3, but I'll take that. I try to get the majority of the beats. That's usually my assignment for me. Like, okay, I may not get all 5 or 6 in this scene. I'm trying to get, if not all of them, at least 5, or the majority of them.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because I'm finding as I diversify the type of shows, right, where you go from one thing where you're doing a show where somebody's done this character 80, 100, whatever, how many times, and then other times you might be, and so what happens there is sometimes there might be a baked in kind of
shtick.
I'm trying to pick a positive word, but like there's something baked in that might be reluctant to, like, kind of finding nuances, because maybe they took a big swing early on and saw that it didn't work, or it gets cut out, so they don't want to, but you're maybe trying to thread the needle a little bit. And then there's times where, like, on the smaller, not smaller, but on the shows that might be premium cable streaming, where they're only doing 10 episodes, right? Then you might arrive when there's a big story shift for the character, and it's so far from what they've done the prior 2, 3, 4 seasons that sometimes they might not have been cast for that type of performance, but that's where the character's gone. And there's a disconnect between, like, what they think the character would do. Yet the character's never done it. And so you're trying to finesse these, like, you can only get what somebody's willing to agree upon conveying, but it becomes an interesting negotiation at times.
It does. And what I've learned in that situation, sometimes, you let them get that routine performance out, sometimes once or twice. But that third take, I come in like, hey, I got that. I have that. Let's change it up a bit. Let's try something different right here. Let's experiment. Let's try this. And I don't just say, let's try this. I say, here's why I want you to try this. Right. And I've learned giving them the why is damn near more important than the try, because they're like, okay, now I understand why the why helps fuel the understanding. And they're like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, that's cool. Right. Yeah.
Well, that's a great approach. And also there's, actors are flooded with so many, they're trying to remember lines that when they read the table read, now you're shooting it and it's had 5 other revisions. So there's remnants of what they read that are still kind of there. And how can you kind of redirect or directed and kind of get everybody back on the page of what it needs to be.
Hey, this is Rob McElhenney, and you are listening to Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon.
Transitions, a director's journey and motivational handbook is Pete Chatmon's upcoming book from Michael Weezy Productions. What started in 1993 has been a marathon of persistence and creative pivots, transitioning from indie filmmaker to teaching at NYU's acclaimed film school, to running a production company, to directing television and commercials, and ultimately eyeing a return to the feature films that gave him his start. A mixture of how-to, self-help, and inspiration, this book is for any person targeting a successful career in the creative arts. Transitions, a director's journey and motivational handbook is coming soon.
So you did a few shorts after making a feature. Like what was the road at, 2001, 2002? What were you doing at that point?
So 2001, I did this indie film with Nas, Isaiah Washington, and Elise Neal that never got completed. Thank God, because it was overly ambitious. I got hired to do it. I was so hungry to direct. I said, I'll take anything. I'll do it. And that was like my first project in LA. And the difference between that one and 1 week was like a family thing. We were all in it for the love of trying to tell a great story. This film I did in LA was all about, it was just a job for a lot of folks. And I saw that disconnect. And I was like, oh shit, this is a job. People don't have the passion in any way, shape, or form. And then it was just, dealing with industry shit I'd never dealt with before. Was like, oh wow, this is what they talk about. Like, okay, all right, okay, cool. But like I said, it never got done. It never got completed. And then after that, 2 years later, we sold a script to MGM that they bought. But once MGM got bought by Sony, got put in turnarounds. That was pretty much that. And then I did a family drama in 2007 that ended up being one of the worst and greatest decisions of my life.
Okay, how so?
Yeah. It was a family drama, a faith-based family drama, which I'm not a huge fan of because sometimes they just lack authenticity. But I was broke, needed a job, and I was like, how bad can this experience be? It's 2 months worth of work for a nice chunk of change. It's gonna get me to DGA. It can't be that bad. It was that bad. It was that bad. It was a horrible experience. It didn't speak to my talent as a filmmaker. That was the biggest hurt, that my name was attached to something that was not indicative of my skill set. But when people see this, they're gonna think this is my skill set. And that's what crushed me. Oh, that crushed me. I was done for about 3 years after that.
Now, when you say done as far as how you were perceived, or done from an internal level?
Internal level. Yeah. I stopped watching movies. I stopped studying. The things that I've been doing as a lifestyle for like 15 years, I wasn't really doing. And like the first year, I didn't even realize it was depression. I just realized that I'm just not feeling this. It was a heartbreaking experience, and not knowing how to handle it, not even knowing what it was just debilitating and paralyzing. So, by year 2 is when I realized, like, oh, I think I'm in a deep depression. I think I'd read something and said, oh, wait, I'm checking off all these boxes. I think that's me. And just kind of wallowing in that, like, man, if this is what this industry entails, I don't really know if I even want something like this, because this was such a horrendous experience. And you can't attribute it to racism, because it wasn't a racist thing. It wasn't systemic oppression. This was something done for us, by us type of situation. So, which made it more cloudy. So just going through that, I was like, but the lesson I learned was listening to my gut, because my gut was screaming all along, don't do it. Right. Don't do this. But my pocket was like, oh, we doing this. Right. Oh, we about to do this. Definitely. And that's the battle, you know what I'm saying? You battle with that, like the struggle and the grind and financial opportunities and, all that kind of stuff.
It sounds like, though, perhaps that was the valley of the career. You know what I mean? Like those valleys are where you find your real compass, because when you start getting the keys, and even now, like you're probably making really good decisions clearly on what you do want to do and don't want to do, as a director, that you make that decision too late, man, that can be rough,
Yeah. So that's why And that's why I'm grateful that I had that valley when I had it, you know what I'm saying, on this low budget film as opposed to a $50 million film or something like that. And I started looking at other filmmakers that experienced these type of situations, you know, like Guillermo del Toro, he had to experience that on the film, you know, Brother Alien 3, he experienced the same. I mean, this happens. And
Right.
You hit that valley and you kind of learn the lessons in that valley and then you come out of it. But you're right, I definitely make much clearer decisions now where I know like, I don't want that. So let's go in the other direction. So that has definitely helped. So, you know, it's one of them battles, it's one of them scars on your body where you had 25 stitches, but it's healed up, but you still got the scar for it.
And if you didn't do it, now if you had never done that situation would come up and you'd be like, man, it won't be that bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? But now you know, like, nah, that shit.
Yeah, it's a price to pay. It's a price to pay. Yeah. That little voice here, like, how bad can it be? Like, man, shut the fuck up. No, we're not doing that.
Right. And now maybe that changes when the number changes, right? There might be a number where you might be like, damn, 10 million.
You know, man, that's the thing. And that's how LA can seduce you. He's like, man, how bad can it be for this number? But man, after talking to certain filmmakers that live in Malibu with a big ass house and a lot of money, but are angry and depressed and just totally messed up mentally. Right. I'm like, you know, that number, that price is high, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know if I even want to deal with that for my spirit, you know what I'm saying? And that's the thing, you realize like you got to protect your spirit.
Right. I will say this, I wonder, and I don't know what folks are telling themselves when they take this, you know, hypothetical $10 million paycheck, right? But I've always felt that if I did do one of those, I would be like, okay, cool, whatever. I understand what I'm doing here, but I'm about to put $2 million in this feature don't nobody want to make, you know? And I feel like if you keep that connection to the drive, because, you know, everything that I ever did was funded either I raised the money or after I started building my production company, I took $30K and made a short, you know, because I was like, yo, don't be the guy who says, oh, they're not messing with me. Like, go do it yourself. Right. And maybe, you know, I've yet to see anybody go and do that. You know what I mean? Somebody take that paycheck, do that job, you know, and then pivot. Because you hear about like, I think George Clooney talks about like Batman allowed him to then make only the decisions that he wanted to moving forward. And then you start seeing Out of Sight and Americana and all the kind, you know, let me do Fail Safe live on TV. You know, like, I don't know, it'd be nice to have an example of that because there's I feel like we got the money out there to support all the stories that you and I know could be made from the filmmakers that have unique voices and want to kind of push the envelope on the Black experience in a narrative sense. But the money just doesn't seem to be put toward it. And I think
it's funny how the money finds itself in projects like, why do you want to tell that story again? You know what I'm saying? Right. That happens. But you spoke to a great point, man. A lot of creators sometimes don't even think about the do for self aspect. They want to be employees more so than saying, let me create and generate a whole different thing with what you've given me. It's basically reinvestment. You know, they don't really think like that. They're thinking like, with this $100 million movie, I'm going to swing for the fences and get a grand slam as opposed to, okay, y'all going to pay me this amount. Like you say, I'll take a percentage of that and go do what I really want to do and then keep it moving and so forth. Right. But a lot of people don't even have that mindset. Right.
Yeah. And then that's a much bigger, you know, that's a whole analysis on systemic oppression and mindset. Have you watched this doc? It's on HBO Max now, Exterminate the Brutes.
No, I just heard about that joint. That's on my list when I get back in the States, man.
Yeah, man. That it's 4 parts. We sat down and watched 3 in a row. And it really gets into how we've gotten here and how it's all a psychological, you know, mind fuck that's been perpetrated by folks so they could have power and create a psychology in themselves and in those beneath them to maintain it. And the trickle down effect of that is inclusive in what you're saying, in like the idea of reinvestment, the idea of like calculated risk. It's just not something that we absorb or flock to.
Yeah.
And understandably.
Yeah.
You spending 50K on 1 week, me, spending 6 years raising money for premium and paying myself $15,000 for my 6 years of work, like that's, you gotta be cut a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny, man, because as the years go on and things haven't happened for you, your friends and family who love you start saying things like, you're so smart. Why don't you try this career? Why don't you try this and look into this and so forth? Because, because of systemic oppression and various things and lacks of opportunity for people of color, everybody just wants, job security and job protection and a sense of stability, I guess, because, and I get it, because, coming up under an oppressive situation is so unstable and you don't really want to see anybody living like that. But like you said, once you make this commitment, like back in the day, man, I think I was 22. Me and my boy made this pledge, it's like, we're going to do this and we're going to walk the earth. That's it. And it becomes that we made that proclamation back then, but, we always reminded ourselves of that proclamation. Like, remember, man, it's this or walk the earth. So that, because you'll get job offers that could be like, oh, wow, that's a whole new career. I never thought about that. But at the end of the day, you have to remind yourself, like, okay, is this what you really want to do? And ultimately, it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I have to constantly go back to the essence of this or walk the earth. So,
right. Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's a beautiful transition, because I was going to ask you, when did you start having an eye on television? And my question is, was stability a factor in that, or what made you want to move into TV?
Well, so two things. I took a job in 2005 as a director's assistant on a TV show called What About Brian? And I didn't really know much about TV, but I remember back in 2000, Bill Duke telling me this, and he put it in such a way that it was indisputable. He said, you buy nice cars and trinkets with films. You buy properties with TV. I was like, because I was shadowing him on a show, City of Angels, and watching him work, and it was like, wow, this is the trip. And so I remembered that. And then when I got this job as a director's assistant on this TV show, I was exposed to a whole new world. And this is still when TV was still looked at as like, the little brother or a step down from film, where filmmakers were filmmakers and TV was, oh, that's just TV, But as I had that job, I started watching more television. And I started seeing this upcoming wave, like, oh, TV storytelling is about to jump the shark. It's about to eclipse the stories that are being told cinematically in the theaters and so forth. Because, while TV is getting better, movies are getting, they're telling less interesting stories and going for the larger tentpole stories. So I'm seeing all this happening. I'm like, well, let me see what's up with this TV. And then also there is a degree of that stability, because I'm like, okay, I can do TV, tell multiple different stories, have that stability, and still strengthen my core as a filmmaker. You know what I'm saying? Because my ultimate goal was to direct for a living. You know what I'm saying? And I kept it broad like that, so I wouldn't be locked into no box or give myself strict print. I said, I just want to do this for a living. You know what I'm saying? Whatever that may entail, I want to direct for a living. And television started to turn into that gateway. And as like I said, this is 05, 06. And shortly after that, these TV shows just started popping up that were just mind blowing, like, wow, this show and then that show and this network and so forth. So that is what really helped solidify it. And that helped reaffirm my drive. And I really started getting into television, man. So it became, I started finding myself watching way more TV shows than films.
Now, how'd you get your first job?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one, man.
Or your first episode directing?
First episode came via Big Bro John Singleton. So he got me an interview with Marvista, the company that was producing his TV show Rebel. And in that interview, I went in there. So leading up to that interview, let me take that back. I've been trying to get into TV since 2006, right? Trying to get opportunities, trying to get into programs and so forth, getting, no love, nothing like that. But what I was doing as a DGA member, I would attend all the workshops, all the panels.
So that film got you into the DGA. The film you mentioned did get you in.
That's what got me, right. So I said, all right, let me maximize this resource that is the DGA, because it's an amazing resource, in terms of education. They got a library, an archive library, where you have craftsmen that are directors, ADs, UPMs, just talking about their stories and their lessons and things of that nature. And in my opinion, it's better than film school because it's real time. It's lived experience that you can incorporate into, what you're doing. So I prepared, not knowing when the opportunity would come, but I kept preparing, so that when I got that interview, I knew the language to speak in the room to let them know he's going to protect the story, performance, and the money.
Right.
So I booked those 2 episodes of Rebel, and that's what really got me going. That led to
now what was that 2016?
That was fall of 2016.
All right. Yeah, okay. Man, I didn't realize that those were the first ones that you did.
Yeah, those first 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I booked them. I reached out to John while I was shadowing on Chicago PD and about Rebel and so forth. So I was shadowing on PD, and then a month later I booked the Rebels, and then kept meeting with all the execs and so forth, and got my first episode of PD, which led to the second one. And
now, how'd you end up shadowing on Chicago PD?
So what I did a TV film called Bad Dad Rehab for TV One. Mm-hmm. And I used, because I knew I needed representation to really get into the rooms I wanted to get into. So I used that film to get an agent who specialized in episodic television.
Got it.
And when I got with my agent, I gave him a strategy like, these are the shows I'm gunning for. This is the lane I want to get into and so forth. And I targeted PD and Fire Med because I'm from Chicago. I know that landscape and so forth. And so he got me a meeting with this right-hand man, Peter Jankowski. We met for like 15 minutes. And he had a straight poker face the whole time. So my agent's like, how the meeting go? I'm like, I really don't know, honestly. I can't really say. This dude's paper face, his poker face is amazing. So I don't know. But turned out it went much better than I thought it did. So he got me a meeting with the producing director in Chicago that next week because I was going to be in the city. And he said, well, I'm directing an episode in 2 weeks. You want to shadow? I'm like, I'll be back. And I came back and shadowed for that.
Man, so what I love here is the specificity, man, of focus for your career and your goals, and then also like what are the available resources that you can maximize at every step. And a lot of folks, sit there and have that libraries available to them, and they don't watch them. And even more so now, it's like you got Netflix, man. You got Hulu. You got Mubi, Criterion Collection, there's no reason to not be versed in the history of this craft. I sometimes I'll talk and I mentioned something. I was like, this is kind of like a Lolita kind of moment. And somebody was like, I don't know the reference. And I was like, okay. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's like, how you not gonna know Gaudi if you're an architect? Or Frank Lloyd Wright, like these are things that I think you're required to know, and they're easily discovered.
Well, because I talked to a lot of young filmmakers as well, man. I remember talking to one, and I said, it's like what Jonathan Demme did. And she's like, well, who's Jonathan Demme? I said, man, listen, don't ever do yourself a favor and go watch all of his movies, read all of his books. He has a book about interviews about Jonathan Demme, all that kind of stuff. I said, you have to educate yourself so you can speak this language. If you want to be taken seriously, you got to. This is the language of the world you want to immerse yourself in. So you have to do such. So
exactly, man. So you got those 2, and then you did well shadowing. Shadowing is something that comes up a lot on the show here. Like, how did you approach that? What were you doing day to day on those? I imagine maybe 7 days of prep, 8 days of shooting on Chicago PD.
In prep, I approached it like I was directing the episode. That was the biggest thing I did. I said, in my head, I'm directing this episode. So in the meetings, any questions asked, I'm writing down my answers and comparing it to his answers and so forth. All while I'm going over the script, I'm looking at the plot points, I'm looking at the storylines and so forth. And I remember on my last day of prep, I gave the director my shot list. I had shot listed the entire episode before we even started. I said, yo, man, here's my shot. I just want to show you this how I like to get down. And he was just like, holy shit, this is cool, man. I've never done a shot list before. This is cool. He's an old school cat. So he said, can I use some of your shots? I'm like, man, I'll be honored. Have at it, bro. Have at it. So, and then every day I'd show up, I'd have my shots with me, and I'm taking notes throughout the day, And I was, for the most part, very quiet on set until someone asked me a question. If they asked me a question, I had to answer, but I was never just arbitrarily talking, So I've learned that, when you're a shadow, it's best to just literally shadow, observe. Don't get in the way, find your moments. Like I would find my moments to ask him questions. And it would usually be towards the end of the day when things are starting to wind down and it's pretty much over. But when when he's in the thick of it, I'm like, he does not need me saying, hey man, so why are you doing this here? Nah. Right. And I tell cats now, like if you shadowing somebody, find your moment.
Argument about?
Like, what is going on here? Like, not now. And that can be a great way to, for them to see like, okay, this guy gets it. He understands the pace, the momentum, the intensity, the level of involvement, and what it takes to, pull this show off. So in doing that, and plus being, so the beauty of it is me being I'm a Chicago kid, I'm on a set in Chicago. There were a couple of people on the crew that worked on my first film.
Wow. So
they were like, yo, we love Carl, he's great, blah, 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 blah. So people were rooting for me in that regard. You know what I'm saying? So when I did my first episode, I mean, the cast, the crew, they were all like, yo, he's a homeboy. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like I was just some cat coming from outer space. I was like, this guy's, from here, grew up here and all that. So it was a rallying cry to definitely support me in that regard.
Now, I want to ask if you had a similar experience, because I had maybe my first 5 shows, there was some connective tissue, like you're mentioning, to the stakeholders of the show. Whether it was, I had shadowed on Blackish, you know what I mean? I had shot a branded content promo with the kids from Grownish for Walmart, you know what I mean? I had shadowed on Greenleaf, but the first time I showed up somewhere I hadn't shadowed, it felt very, 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 very different. The sense of support was not kind of as clear. Can you speak to your first episode where you were Carl? Hi, I'm the director. I don't have a bunch of credits that you are going to look at and say, I should breathe easy. Like, what was that like when you walked into that environment?
Well, that was actually after I did Rebel, my very first episode after Rebel was the originals, CW show with Julie Play. And nobody knew me on the original. That was down in Atlanta, actually in Conyers, this town outside of Atlanta. Nobody knew me from Adam. They'd never seen me, never heard of me before. So what won them over was my work ethic. I mean, I would literally be in there from 9 a.m. to 9:30 at night, just getting things. It was so intense for me because I was like, I looked at it as I've got to maximize this opportunity because this can help project me further. I was going so hard. My AD and DP came in the room like at 8 o'clock one night. They're like, Carl, go home, man. You're going way too hard. Just go home. Like, guys, I hear you, but I gotta do this. And I gotta make sure this is right, this is right, this is right. And they saw how hard I was going. They were like, man, this dude is all invested. And then the cast as well, I got a great rapport with the cast because a couple of the guys had directed episodes. So they all had an affinity with what I was doing. And I remember one actor, because they told me some of the actors could be a handful, but I never experienced that because I was talking story with them. But I remember on one day in particular, I had my shot list and I left it on the ground near the actor. He got a chance to take a look at it. And back then I had my shots on there, had notes from the tone meeting. It was a straight manual. Right. He looked over at the shot list and he was like, okay. And I mean, like I said, it was a cool experience because I was going so hard. I was so locked in, like, man, I was unwavering with it and just so focused and so prepared. That's another thing. I was so prepared and had so many things mapped out. Like I remember, that's another thing. One day in particular, I got like 72 setups, which they said was a record of some sort. And I was like, okay, cool. That's great. But that, once again, that comes from having a tactical game plan that everybody can follow and that everybody's aware of. So we're all moving in the same direction. So that made everybody fans.
Do you prepare any differently now at this point of your career? Is it as what's the adjective? Are you going as, I don't want to say you would be going less hard, but has anything changed in your prep in terms of?
Yeah, I prep smarter. Mm-hmm. So every show I'm learning something from that I can incorporate into the next show. It's a compounding interest type of situation. So the way I prep now, the way I prepped back then is because I had so much more to learn. Right. And I was just kind of like, let me just cover all angles so that, let me cover as many bases as I can with this prep. But now, as I've acquired even more experience, as I prep, I still spend my time invested in the story and reading and things of that nature, but I just prep smarter. So it's not as, I'm not buried in the books like I was before. It's more so I'm incorporating prior experiences and coming up with ideas, and then also looking at it like I always try to do at least one thing in every show that makes me nervous or makes me scared, just so I can stay on my toes. You know what I'm saying? That there's always this one sequence I'm like, they're either gonna love this or they're gonna hate my ass, but I gotta go for it.
Right.
And that's worked for me in a lot of different ways on a lot of different shows. So that's become one of my and getting comfortable in that nervousness. Like, I'm scared as hell, but I got the courage to keep moving through it. And let's see what happens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And also too, it's such a weird psychological game too, right? Because like when you start asking for certain equipment, you know, they start saying, oh, he intends to do something. You know what I mean? Like, and all of that is like designed to, I think I've told this story here. Like I remember one time I was like, yo, can y'all move? Can we have the little parking blocks moved? Because I know the car has to come in from here, but I want it to end up over here because I want this shot to build into a steady cam, you know, at XYZ. And they were like looking down. I could tell they were like, how the fuck we gonna move them concrete cinder blocks? But I asked because I wanted that. Mm-hmm. And it took 2 days before they came back and said, no, we can't do it. But I wanted y'all to have those meetings and be thinking about that. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing, man. That's another thing you can use your advantage, man. When you hit them with, I've learned when you ask the right questions and you propose the right things, it can spark, you know, they get curious because they're trying to figure out what you're thinking. Or they're like, oh, he's trying to definitely raise the bar for the show in its entirety. And it gets folks excited, man. Like, you know, one show I had, my DP had been doing it for years. He's excited. He's running up and down hills. And one of the camera ops was like, man, dude, we haven't seen this guy excited like this in I don't know how many years, man. What's going on? I'm like, he believes in what we're doing. And that's all you can really ask for with anybody. If you get them to believe in what you're doing, that enthusiasm, that excitement comes back that we all had that got us in this industry in the first place. So that's what I always try to tap into. But, you know, it comes with people like, we've never done that on this show. Like, you're right, you haven't. That's why it's a really cool time to try it now in season 4 or season 6 or whatever. So
you've done, how many episodes of TV have you done, would you say?
I'm currently prepping my 25th.
25 episodes, all 1 hours, right?
All 1 hours, yeah.
All 1 hours, okay. So, because we started around the same time, I might have a few more, but the virtue of the half hour is just you get them at a quicker clip. I could do 2 halves in year one almost.
I got you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What is it that after film school and shorts on the weekend that were revelatory, right? And then 1 week, and then more short films and director assistant, and now TV, and then the feature film that got you into the Guild. Like, what do you now look at as your responsibility as a director? And if that is, well, if it's a film, it's this, if it's TV, it's this, you know, feel free to break it down. But like, what's your takeaway now? Like, if you were to say, like, this is the responsibility of the director.
To tell authentic stories. Like, for me, I look at it like this, man. Whether it's a film or a TV show, as the director, I'm the first audience member. I'm the first audience member that has the opportunity to manipulate the story to make it even better for the audience after me. So when I approach it like that, there's a reverence with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, because I'm the first audience member, I got to make sure I'm the filter that says, okay, if it's hitting me like this, if we do this, it's going to hit the audience even more like this. So I'm always thinking of the audience behind me, like, okay, let me sit here in this chair and make sure I'm getting these things that when it's all pieced together, they'll be moved and they'll be sitting there like, wow. Or just hit with a resonating emotional, influence.
Damn, I'm gonna tell you right now, I will be using that, and I will be giving credit. I'm gonna tell you, what Carl Seaton told me.
All good.
That's dope, man, because that also the protectiveness of how you describe that should keep you engaged through all the bullshit, right?
Exactly.
Because
it helps you cut through the bullshit. Like, okay, what are we really here for? What is this really about? You know what I'm saying? Because you can really get caught up in the bullshit. You know what I'm saying? The bullshit is real good at bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Right. You ain't lying, man. So, man, that's awesome. So what do you look, if you look at the next few years of the journey, like what are the targets for you? What do you want to do? What do you have your eye on? Like what can we look out for? You know what I mean?
It's funny, man, because initially I just wanted to, do episodes and just go from show to show to show, telling different stories. But, as you go, you're exposed to different things. And then people talk to you and you have different conversations that just open you up to a lot of different things. So where I am now, man, I love going from different shows, telling different stories, but also want to, open more doors for more people of color who just need an opportunity like I did. That's number one. And then also, I look at the template of like a Dick Wolf and what he's created, you know what I'm saying? Or even what Issa Rae is about to do, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I can do something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's about planning that and just telling broader stories and getting away from tropes and establishing a certain brand of quality so that if you see my name on something like, okay, he coming with some heat, you know what I'm saying? That's the biggest thing, so that when I can present other filmmakers, it'd be the same type of situation.
That's what's up, man. So I got a couple lightning round questions for you. I'll tell you from my end of these conversations, I've been preparing differently in the sense that I just read up and make sure I'm aware of everybody's work and kind of point of view. And then I just try and come here and rap. So I got these questions have come up to me. Okay. Number one, tell me about Get Fly Fridays.
So when I first got in the DGA, I would go I would walk around the lobby of the DGA and I see all these directors in suits. And I was like, wow, I never thought about rocking. I was not a suit guy at all, but I made a promise to myself during the Valley. I said, if I ever get to a point where I'm working consistently, I'm gonna remember this moment I'm in, and to honor that, I'm gonna wear a suit on Friday. So that's where it really started from, rocking a suit on Friday. And it's kind of grown from there because on certain shows, it gets cats excited and they join me, like my AD, some of the crew, everybody puts on a suit. So it becomes a thing on Friday. We all take a little group picture and stuff. So it's become a little thing, man, because, it reminds them from, some guys usually wear, ties on Friday. But like I said, personally for me, it reminds me of where I was, where I've come from. And also it's a little fun thing to do on set. And, I got a dope stylist, Milton Latrell out of Chicago with Shop Agriculture. He styles me. I can't take credit for my looks. Mm-hmm. I say, here's my size. He gives me the wardrobe and all that, and he decks me out. This guy, he has a passion for fashion like I have a passion for film, and that's why it works so well. So that's where it comes from.
I might need that contact because I got a couple custom suits, but I know I need to get up on that.
He's the best. This dude is amazing. Yeah,
that's what's up. So I will ask this question, and I'll preface even before you reply that it is in no way an indictment on your other work, but like, what's been your favorite show or scene to direct?
The opening sequence of episode 8, season 3 of Snowfall. That's probably been because we were using motion control. It was taking a lot of time, but I knew it was gonna be dope. But when you're shooting it, you may have an idea. We had been working on this idea. Me and my DP Tommy Maddox, we've been working on this idea. I was like, I got an idea to do the sequence, and it grew to this motion control thing. And so Tommy, my AD, Dennis, we were all in on this, but it was taking a little time. And the producer was like, this is taking way too long, 6/8 of a page. And I'm like, maybe let me start modifying it. And my DP was like, man, don't you change a fucking thing. This shit is dope. You start modifying it, it's gonna ruin the whole thing. And I'm like, all right, let's just live in it then. He was 100% right, 100% right. And that sequence is one of my proudest moments in terms of storytelling because it condenses a woman's addiction into like a minute and a half, minute and 45 seconds to show. It's not just her smoking, but you see her wardrobe change, her face changes, her bedroom changes until she starts hawking stuff. So we just tell this story so cinematically in that time. And I'm like, and I hold that with me because sometimes, once again, it goes back to when you're doing something that scares you, don't let the fear disrupt you. Just push through that joint. You know what I'm saying? So I always give praise to my DP Tommy Maddox for reminding me of that. He said, man, this shit is dope. Don't change a fucking thing, because if you change it, it's gonna ruin the whole thing. You just gotta live it. And we lived in it. So I hold that dearly, man. And nowadays, like I said, when I'm doing the show, I'm like, okay, I'm about to do something we've never done before. I go back to that. Right. I go back to that day we shot that.
Did you get any direct shout outs from anybody from the show in relationship to what y'all did?
Wait, I'm not sure I follow you.
Did the showrunner hit you up like, yo, that was?
Oh yeah. Oh man, dude, it just set off that episode. Yeah, I got a lot of shout outs from, the showrunner, the network, you know what I'm saying? Because I was asked back to do the last 2 episodes of this season. So my first one comes on this Wednesday and the next one comes on next Wednesday. So I did episodes 9 and 10 this year. So yeah, that risk paid off, man. And that's usually how it goes, man. You roll calculated dice, the payoff can be rewarding.
I love that. Yeah, man. I feel you, man. I did a similar thing on an episode of Grey's, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And then when they ran the promo for the episode, it's the shot. And I was like, okay, I was right. But yeah, you gotta fight through the because our whole currency is day making. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, we make days. And even if you know that you'll catch up on the back end because you can simplify later scenes, sometimes you feel like, well, they don't know that. Yeah. And they don't feel that. And you're like weighing all this bullshit. So it's great that y'all had that collaborative. Yeah.
No, it was dope. But to answer your question even further, more so than the actual showrunner and the network, other shows that I've been eyeing, it became a calling card. Dope. They're like, oh, and it's allowed me to get access into shows I may not have gotten access to without that type of, episode under my belt.
Can you name those shows? Just curious.
I would rather not, because one I haven't done yet. One I've done that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So I'd rather just hold tight.
No doubt. Okay, and then the last question here in this lightning round, brother, is if you could tell yourself, your younger self, a couple words of advice back in 1998, 1999, what would you say?
Do not be afraid to fail, but make sure you learn the lesson from the fail. Embrace your failures and the lessons from those failures. Because back in the day, I was like, I don't ever want to fail. I had a fear of failing until I failed. I said, okay, this is a fail right here. This is an unequivocal fail I'm sitting in. And so, yeah, I would just say, if you fail, learn the lesson. And then it's not even necessarily a fail anymore. It's just a lesson. It costs you a little bit. So I would tell my young self, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Just learn from it so that you never make that mistake again.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. This is episode 26, I think this is going to be.
Oh, wow.
So we'll drop this on the premiere of your second episode of Snowfall. So,
word. Okay. That's what's up.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure rapping with other directors. I got some inspiration here. I got some tools that I can add to my toolkit, man. And I'm sure the listeners did as well.
Hey, brother, before you cut off, man, I gotta say this to you, man. I can't let us get off without telling you, man, how valuable what you're doing is to not just myself and our peers, but so many young filmmakers need to see and hear people like you talking about the craft in this way, man. This is a level of currency that you just can't get anywhere, man. So I applaud you for this, man. Like I told you before, I've been a fan from day one. So this is awesome, man. I look forward to every episode because I definitely take nuggets from each one. I got my little notebook where I'm like, oh, that's a gem. That's a bar. That's a bar right there. So, it's kudos to you, brother, man. So what you're doing is on the right side of things, man. So much love to you on that.
Man, much love, man. Appreciate it. What's up, people? This is Pete Chatmon. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter via @PeteChatmon. Follow the pod on Facebook on our Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon official page, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it via Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon @gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name Chatmon. All right, so thank you for listening to episode 26 with Carl Seaton. Join us for Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon, episode 27 next week. Guest undetermined, TBD, TBA. Subject matter, I don't know yet because I'm shooting. But what I will do is try and record this thing the weekend before Wednesday, right after I wrap, or at some other point. So we appreciate y'all. Any questions, hop to that mailbag, hit us up on social media. And as always, stay safe, spread love, and keep creating.